Hi guys, my name is Mitcha Pierre for Project Fmile. Project Fmile is a project that was started with an aim of spreading awareness on mental health and suicide here in Kenya. So first things first, we are currently in the middle of a pandemic. A lot of us have more questions than answers, and during this time it is easy for people to spread misinformation. So ensure you're getting your information from the right websites. This could be WHO, World Health Organization, CDC, Center for Disease Control, and your various Ministry of Health. Ensure you're listening to your government. Your governments are doing everything possible to ensure that they do flatten the curve. Do whatever you can to flatten the curve. Please stay at home. If you have to leave the house, ensure you're leaving the house with a mask on and just taking every preventative measure out there. Sanitize your hands, wash your hands, and yeah, let's get into today's video. So with this pandemic, a lot of us have had to go back home. Those who were in boarding school came back home. Those who were in university had to go back home. Just people had to go back home, and home isn't a happy place for everyone, and that's a sad reality. We have to accept that a fact. Not everyone is happy at home. Some homes are really abusive. Some homes are very dysfunctional settings. Some homes are just toxic, plain toxic, and there's no other way to frame it. And home is just not safe for everyone. So yes, home should feel safe for everyone. Home should be where you feel loved, where you feel protected, where you feel cared for, and all that. But sadly, this is not for everyone. And today's video, we're talking about abusive parents, and this is not an easy topic to cover, as I am African. So being African, we are not allowed to say parents are abusive, or our parents are toxic, or our parents are dysfunctional, or something of the sort. That's just not normal. Our culture has taught us that we cannot call out our parents on behaviors that are toxic and that are abusive or manipulative. You're just simply not allowed to do that, and that leaves a lot of people currently distressed, as they're not able to speak up their mind or what's going on in their heads. And this should not be the case. You should be able to have a conversation with your parent without having to feel like it's going to lead to an argument. It does not have to lead to a fight every time you're about to talk to your parent. And sadly, as I've said, we are not allowed to talk about this topic, and we decided, let's talk about abusive parents. Let's talk about abuse. Now, contrary to popular belief, abuse isn't always carried out by a stranger. Most of the times it's carried out by someone we know. It could be your parents, it could be your siblings, it could be your teachers, something of the sort. It is not a stranger most of the time. So let's talk about the different types of abuse. So with abuse, there is emotional abuse. With emotional abuse, there are things that are said that tend to hurt your emotions, as the word suggests. So some examples of emotional abuse include constant belittling, shaming, and humiliating, calling names and making negative comparisons to others, telling a child they are no good, worthless, bad, or a mistake, frequent yelling, threatening, or bullying, ignoring or rejecting a child as punishment, giving them the silent treatment, limiting physical contact with the child, no hugs, kisses, or other signs of affection, exposing a child to violence against others, whether it is against the other parent, a sibling, or even a pet. The other form of abuse is child neglect. It's a very common type of child abuse. It is a pattern of failing to provide for a child's basic needs, which include clothing, food, hygiene, or supervision. This is one of the hardest forms of abuse to spot. Sometimes a parent might become physically or mentally unable to care for a child. Other times, alcohol or drug abuse may seriously impair judgment and the ability to keep a child safe. The third type of abuse to a child is physical abuse. This involves physical harm or injury to the child. It may be the result of a deliberate attempt to hurt the child or excessive physical punishment. With physical abuse, the following elements are present: unpredictability, lashing out in anger, using fear to control behavior. The last type of abuse is sexual abuse. Child sexual abuse is an especially complicated form of abuse because it's layers of guilt and shame. Now, we did talk about sexual abuse and sexual violence in our previous video. I will link it down in the description box. Now, sexually abused children are often tormented by shame and guilt. This is one of the reasons why some victims of sexual abuse do not speak up. So warning signs of emotional abuse are excessively withdrawn, fearful or anxious about doing something wrong, shows extremes in behavior, extremely compliant, demanding, passive, or aggressive, doesn't seem to be attached to the parent or caregiver, acts either inappropriately adult, taking care of other children, or inappropriately infertile, thumb sucking, throwing tantrums, etc. Warning signs of physical abuse. I feel like this is one of the easiest forms of abuse to spot. Frequent injuries or unexplained bruises. The child is always watchful, as if waiting for something bad to happen. Injuries appear to have a pattern such as marks from a hand or belt. Shies away from touch, flinches at sudden movements, or seems afraid to go home. Wears inappropriate clothing to cover up injuries such as long-sleeved shirts on hot days. Warning signs of child neglect. Clothes are ill-fitting, filthy, or inappropriate for the weather. There are untreated illnesses and physical injuries. The child is frequently unsupervised or left alone or allowed to play in unsafe situations. The child is frequently late or missing from school. Warning of signs of child sexual abuse. There is trouble walking or sitting, an STD or pregnancy, especially under the age of 14. Displays knowledge of sexual acts inappropriate for their age, or even seductive behavior. Makes strong efforts to avoid a specific person without an obvious reason. Doesn't want to change clothes in front of others or participate in physical activities. Some of the risk factors for child abuse and neglect. These are alcohol and drug abuse. So if your parent is an alcoholic or does abuse drugs, they are more likely to be physically or even sexually abusive with you, or especially child neglect. So yeah, that's one risk factor that puts a child at risk of any form of abuse. Another risk factor is untreated mental illnesses. Another risk factor is lack of parenting skills, domestic violence, and stress and lack of support. Because here's the thing, parenting isn't an easy job, and that's something we all have to admit. It's not easy to parent a child. So of course, when there's lack of support and there's a lot of stress, you do make errors when it comes to parenting your children. The next thing is how to help an abused child or neglected child. Now, the first thing you have to do is avoid denial. So when you keep on denying that this is happening, you're not going to be able to offer any help to that child. So avoid denial and remain calm in the situation. Do not overreact, as that can put the child at more risk of abuse. Don't ask the child leading questions that may confuse the child. Just ask the child to tell you their story as it is. Reassure the child that they did not do anything wrong. Most victims of abuse in childhood do feel like it was their fault. So reassure them that whatever is happening is not their fault. They have nothing to do with it. Always remind them that it is not their fault, whatever is going on, whether it's neglect, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's physical abuse. Remind them that it's not their fault. The thing is that safety does come first. If you feel your safety or that of the child is going to be compromised if you do intervene, leave it to professionals. So yeah, reporting child abuse or neglect. So especially being African, it's really hard to report instances of child abuse or neglect, because we have been conditioned that some of these acts are forms of disciplining, yet they really aren't. That the debate of whether you should cane your child or not is not for us here. But anyway, yeah, you don't want to interfere with another family. So even as an adult, you might not want to call out these behaviors and go like, well, that was wrong. You don't want to go there because, again, you don't want to feel like you're interfering in someone else's life. So another fear is that you may break someone's home, which isn't always the case, because if you do report some of these abuses in time, that means that there is a chance for the parents to go for parenting classes and all that. Of course, there are certain forms of abuse. It is imminent for legal action to be taken, for example, with sexual abuse and all that. So yeah. Now, signs that your parents were emotionally abusive. Now, of course, we are very scared to say our parents or some of our parents have been emotionally abusive, especially if you are African. If you've grown up with very strict parents, you cannot say that outrightly that my parents were abusive. You're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to do that, simply because, again, this mindset has been cultivated in us that our parents have provided for us, so we cannot call out their toxic behaviors, which again has causes a lot of harm, because you cannot speak your truth. You're not allowed to speak up on what's going on. So Signs that your parents were emotionally abusive: they were overly critical and negative towards you. They always criticized what you did. They were always negative towards you, even if you did your best, even if you did your level best, even if you got that 100% in math, even if you got a certificate, let's say in Model United Nations. They're not going to be like, oh wow, you've done well. They'll be like, oh okay, cool. Or criticize you, well, you could have done better. If you get, let's say for example, like 96%, they'll be like, oh well, you could have done better. So yeah, that's a sign your parents were emotionally abusive. They invalidated or dismissed your emotions. Let's say you're going through something in school and all that, and you've decided, let me tell mom or dad, and they go like, well, there are people who've gone through so much worse, so they end up invalidating what you're going through, and you just don't get any help at the end of it all. They were overly moody. Now, all of us as human beings do have mood swings. Sometimes we just, things are not okay and we're in a bad mood. I happen to have the days where I'm moody. You have your days when you're moody. And I tend to find it best to just withdraw yourself from people when you're moody. Just tell people, okay, I'm not in a good mood, so I will excuse myself. But not everyone does that. So yeah, you end up being on the watch out for your parents' mood, kind of observe, are they in a good mood? Can I talk to them right now? And all that. They were passive aggressive. Another sign that your parents were emotionally abusive is that they guilted you. They tend to guilt trip you and make you feel guilty for a lot of things that weren't even your fault. They gave you the silent treatment. Now, I do not agree with the silent treatment, again, simply because it's a form of emotional abuse. If you have an issue with somebody, please speak up on it. Just say, you did ABCD and I don't find it correct, and the issue will be resolved. Do not give someone the silent treatment, whether it's your parent, whether it's your child. Just don't do that. They were physically present but emotionally absent. I feel like this is very self-explanatory, but we know such people. We know people who are physically present, that they'll be there, they'll provide money, they'll provide food and all that, but they're just emotionally absent. You blame yourself for other people's bad behavior. As a result of abuse, you tend to feel like you are the reason why things are happening. So you will blame yourself for, let's say, your friend's bad behavior, your parents' bad behavior, yet in reality it's not your fault. The thing is that you exhibit self-destructive behaviors. This could be self-harming, drug addiction and all that. Sign is that deep down you are angry at your parents. If you end up feeling like you have some unresolved anger towards your parents, chances are they were emotionally abusive with you. Signs that you were emotionally abused: you have unhealthy relationships with others. If you tend to find yourself in toxic relationships, you tend to find yourself in relationships where you feel like you're trying to fix somebody, you were abused as a child. You were emotionally abused as a child. You have low self-esteem due to the fact, let's say, you were neglected, or your emotions weren't acknowledged, or you are over criticized. You tend to have low self-esteem. You feel like you're not good enough, and that's a huge problem. You are extremely pessimistic. If you were emotionally abused, you just cannot see the good in anything. You just tend to see things as black and white. You tend to see things in a negative light. So yeah. Another sign is you repress your emotions. If you tend to find yourself hiding what you're going through, chances are you were emotionally abused as a child. Another thing is you were ignored. As I stated earlier, your parents may have tended to invalidate or dismiss your emotions. So yeah, being ignored, your emotions were just never acknowledged, or the things that you're going through, or even your achievements, were just never acknowledged. So yeah. You were frequently compared to your siblings. I just cannot stress this enough. It is not okay to compare your children to their siblings. Their siblings are different from them, and you need to understand that people cannot all be the same. These are some of the signs of emotional abuse. I know in this video we've majorly delved deeper into the topic of emotional abuse, but we will talk about dysfunctional families in later videos. So yeah, I hope you like that video. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you click that notification bell over there so that you get a notification every time we post videos on Fridays here. Follow us on Instagram at Project Fmile, Twitter at Project Fmile, Snapchat at Project Fmile. So yeah.